Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Friday, the 5th of September. I'm Caroline Hepker here in London. Coming up today, OpenAI plans a Broadcom team-up to deliver its own artificial intelligence chips in direct competition with Nvidia as Trump teases new semiconductor tariffs. Traders brace for today's US jobs report as markets believe a September rate cut is a foregone conclusion. And an icon of fashion dies. We look at how Giorgio Armani rewrote the rules of power dressing and what his passing means for the future of the luxury empire he built. Let's start with a roundup of our top stories. OpenAI is partnering with Broadcom to design and produce artificial intelligence chips in a direct challenge to Nvidia's market dominance. Bloomberg understands that the first chips will begin being shipped next year. Broadcom's CEO, Hock Tan, made a veiled reference to the partnership and to $10 billion in orders from a new customer during the company's earnings call on Thursday. Tan also told investors that Broadcom's AI outlook will improve significantly next year, with the company expecting revenue from AI semiconductors to reach $6.2 billion in the fourth quarter. Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet has more now.
His comments on the conference call helped ease concerns about slowing growth. Tan says the company's working with prospective customers to develop AI accelerators, a market currently dominated by Nvidia. Jay Goldberg is an analyst at Seaport Research Partners.
I think the truth of it is anytime Nvidia loses share today, it's not to AMD, it's to somebody who's doing their internal silicon, and Broadcom is helping them do that.
Tan says he'll stay on as Broadcom CEO until at least 2030 in New York. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
President Donald Trump says that he will be imposing tariffs on semiconductor imports into the US very shortly. He says the levies could spare goods from companies like Apple that have pledged to boost their investments into the United States. Trump was speaking during a dinner at the White House with a rare gathering of some of the world's biggest tech leaders.
Chips and semiconductors, and we'll be putting tariffs on companies that aren't coming in. We'll be putting a tariff very shortly. You probably are hearing we'll be putting a fairly substantial tariff on, not that high, but fairly substantial tariff.
The US president has previously suggested that the tariff rate on semiconductors could be well above 100%, reaching potentially as high as 200 or 300%. Bond and currency traders are bracing for today's US employment report, which is now seen as pivotal to the Fed's coming rate decisions. Markets are currently pricing in a quarter-point cut in 2 weeks' time and almost 4 more by the end of next year. The Chicago Fed President, Austin Goolsbee, says that policymakers will be watching the data closely.
The job market is in the dual mandate. So if we feel like the job market is deteriorating, that's going to be a thing arguing for maybe we should loosen.
Austin Goolsbee there. He also stressed his independence from partisan politics. He was speaking after President Trump's Fed nominee, Stephen Myron, told the US Senate that he would retain his White House job while also serving at the central bank. Now, let's get to some politics here in Europe. So markets are pricing in a political crisis in France as the Prime Minister Francois Bayrou looks to set to lose a confidence vote on Monday. According to new research from Bloomberg Economics, any further tightening in financing conditions adds risks to the country's anticipated economic recovery next year. Prime Minister Francois Bayrou told the French station France 2 TV that he does not regret calling that vote.
Est-ce que je regrette? En aucune manière.
Do I regret it? In no way. And this is exactly the choice I've made. I will explain to you why. For months, France has been discovering the situation that I myself have been highlighting for years, that we are drowning in debt.
En évidence depuis des années qu'elle croule sous les dettes.
Francois Bayrou speaking there via a translator. Bloomberg Economics projections show that failure to deliver on a crucial €44 billion fiscal consolidation plan could see France's debt to GDP ratio hit 125% in 2030 compared to 115 in 2025. Bayrou had said that he remains open to other budget proposals as long as the overall deficit reduction target remains in place. And here in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that he will act on the outcome of an independent investigation into his deputy, Angela Rayner. Rayner has admitted underpaying tax on a flat that she bought in Hove, a town in the UK, blaming incorrect legal advice. Starmer told BBC News an ethics probe needs to establish the facts.
There's a clear procedure. I strengthened that procedure. It is now taking place. I am expecting a result pretty quickly. I do want it to be comprehensive, as you'd expect. And then, of course, I will act on whatever the report is that's put in front of me.
A government official said that the report could be presented to Keir Starmer later today. Today also marks the start of the Reform UK Party conference. Lobbyists and journalists are headed to the event to see if the party's lead in the polls is matched by its professionalism. And France's Emmanuel Macron says that 26 countries are ready to deploy troops to Ukraine after a ceasefire to guarantee the country's security. But there was little clarity about US commitments. The French president spoke alongside Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky after a gathering of the so-called Coalition of the Willing in Paris.
This force does not have the will or objective of waging some war against Russia, but it is a force that must guarantee peace and provide a very clear strategic signal.
Emmanuel Macron speaking there via a translator. US President Donald Trump joined the meeting remotely, though Washington's concrete commitments to the measures was not made clear. The White House previously ruled out sending troops to Ukraine, but pledged to provide some form of backstop, including intelligence and air support. Now, according to the Finnish president, Alexander Stubb, Trump used that call to demand that Europe stop the purchase of Russian oil and gas, and that it put more economic pressure on Moscow. This comes as the US president is moving to sign an executive order today, changing the name of the US Department for Defense to the Department of War. And those are some of our top stories for you this morning. Let's look at the markets then. So European stocks closed up 0.6%, big rally on Wall Street too. S&P 500 reached a record high. Asian stocks continue to climb this morning. So the MSCI Asia Pacific Index up 0.7%. You've also seen Chinese stocks rebound from the slump that we saw yesterday. And with President Trump signing an executive order implementing his trade deal with Japan, the Nikkei's also done well. Futures for Europe and the US are also higher. And as I say, we are now factoring in that rate cut, or certainly investors and traders are, for September is pretty much nailed on. 10-year US Treasury yields down a basis point at 4.15. So it's fairly quiet in terms of the long bonds as well, easing off across Europe yesterday. And the dollar right now down 0.1%, with the euro and sterling actually both firmer, at least for now. Those are the markets. In a moment, we are going to bring you more on that big AI chip deal. So Broadcom is going to work with OpenAI to make a chip accelerator. And Giorgio Armani, the death of a design legend, we'll be thinking about that. But before we do, there's another story that has also really caught my attention. I don't know, it's the memory of your holiday fading fast, mine is. It was a job that many people actually thought would disappear. The travel agent. Bloomberg's Red Brown, though, has been writing about this, that apparently in the last 3 years, the number of people describing themselves as travel agents or advisors on LinkedIn has gone up more than 50%. It's apparently the fifth fastest growing profession over the past 3 years. He was talking to, former lawyers and former forensic accountants about how they've made the move. Apparently one of these former white collar workers, I suppose, making $3 to $3.5 million as a travel agent. And apparently, she says, far fewer hours. It's a really great story. I'll put a link to it in our show notes. But Reed Brown reporting about, yes, the travel agent is alive. People want they want advice, curation, direction, support when they go away, especially when they're spending big money, which apparently a lot of people are. Big boom in travel right now. So that's one story of interest today. OpenAI is going to design and produce an AI accelerator chip with the semiconductor giant Broadcom from next year. Broadcom's CEO, Hock Tan, told investors that the company's outlook will improve significantly in 2026 as a result. Joining me now to discuss and think about how big a deal this is, Bloomberg's Mark Anderson. Mark, great to speak to you. So what do you think this chip is actually going to do, this AI accelerator chip that is being designed, and why do you think it's such a significant deal?
Hi, Caroline. Thanks for having me. The chip will be used in-house by OpenAI to run its more powerful GPT-5 model that was released last month. It gives OpenAI more control over its computing power at a time when it's struggling to keep up with demand for its wildly popular ChatGPT service. And I think it's a really big deal because OpenAI joins other leading tech companies in taking serious steps to break their reliance on Nvidia's AI chips. You know, for sure, this is really bad news for Nvidia.
Okay. Broadcom CEO Hock Tan, then he was on the earnings call. He made a big impression with that. What did he say?
Yeah. Broadcom's earnings report didn't really wow anyone, especially investors who were expecting a much bigger payoff from the AI boom. But they did sit up on the call when Tan said the company had been attracting a mysterious new customer who wanted custom-designed chips for AI tasks. That was exactly the news that the markets wanted to hear, I think. You know, we've known for a while that AI companies are looking for alternatives to Nvidia chips, and this was a vote of confidence, I think, in Broadcom's ability to meet that demand.
All of this against a backdrop of semiconductor tariffs, more coming very shortly, according to the latest comments from President Trump. And I suppose your view on how rare is it to see all of those tech executives in one room at one long table, flowers and dinner and the whole thing?
Yeah. I mean, I guess we're sort of getting used to this kind of theatrical, stunts by the Trump administration. And Trump has been threatening these tariffs on chips for quite a while. He's basically telling tech leaders, wow me with your massive spending plans or face tariffs on your chips. And I do think his plan seems to be working. He hosted the top CEOs. He met his Mark Zuckerberg, Apple's Tim Cook yesterday at the White House, and we could see them all bending over backwards to tell Trump how much they're investing in the U.S. I think Meta and Apple have each pledged $600 billion in the coming years.
Okay, Mark, thanks so much for being with me. Really good to speak to you. Bloomberg's Asia Tech editor, Mark Anderson, on that deal then between OpenAI and Broadcom and what it might mean. But yes, also a reassuring note for markets that, the boom in artificial intelligence at least seems still very, very solid from OpenAI and Broadcom's perspective. Anyway, Mark, thanks so much for being with me. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this. Now, the billionaire designer Giorgio Armani has died at the age of 91, having built a retail empire stretching from haute couture to jeans to hotels to chocolates, so many things. Armani started his namesake brand in 1975 and remained determined to keep it independent, working on projects right up until his death. Joining me now to discuss is our fashion watcher, Bloomberg's Tiwa Adebayo. Tiwa, an extraordinary creative force in Giorgio Armani. How do you think he's going to be remembered in terms of his style?
Hey, Caroline, that's right. He's had a huge impact on the industry. You mentioned he started the brand back in 1975, but actually Armani is still one of the most recognisable brands at fashion weeks around the world. It's known equally for house codes of sort of sharp Italian tailoring and intricate gowns as well. But he was also something of a king of versatility. I think what's really interesting about Armani is that it comprised a number of brands. So you had the ready-to-wear affordable pieces from Armani Exchange, then Giorgio Armani, famously the high-end haute couture. There was even a sports brand, EA7, and then the luxury Emporio Armani. So I think certainly for me, in terms of my fashion education, it's one of the first couture brands that I really became aware of, simply because you saw the Armani Exchange stores in shopping centres in the 2010s. I mean, it really shows its cultural force. And I think actually it's this sort of diversification and catering to different sections of the market that helped Armani become a sort of household name and also a billion-dollar empire. So I think he'll be remembered kind of for pioneering that model, bringing luxury to the high street, and at the same time creating some of the most recognizable couture looks that we've ever seen, of graced runways and red carpets as well.
Yeah, those fabulous menswear suits too. Yeah, in terms of the business then, I've been reading and thinking about all of the power that he managed to sort of capture with his collaborations with Hollywood stars and celebrity. He really caught on to that very early, and yet control was so paramount too.
Yeah, I mean, Anna Wintour famously said that Armani gave movie stars a sort of modern way to look. And I think really cleverly, he was able to channel the sort of glamour of old Hollywood and really package it through the modern era of paparazzi, particularly around the late 90s and early 2000s, perhaps an era that we don't even have now today. But I think he was able to do this really by tightly controlling the brand, remaining heavily involved in the design process, and that really ensured cohesion. But he also insisted that the company remained independent, and that's something that we don't see very often these days, especially in a luxury fashion industry that's becoming increasingly consolidated under conglomerates such as LVMH, owns Laura Piana, and Fendi, and Kering, that owns Gucci. It's something of a rarity these days to see a brand that hasn't brought in kind of a slew of different creative directors, like we've seen with the likes of Dior, for example, sticking to that sort of founder designer model, so much so that he remained very active in his final days. Even in October 2024, he was presenting his spring-summer 2025 women's wear collection in New York City, so much so as well that it raised questions sort of recently in June when he missed runway shows. That's not very common from Giorgio Armani. He was recovering from an undisclosed illness back then. So he definitely has retained control over his brand in a way that we don't see very often.
No, and so it raises that question of what happens to the company and the business now.
Yeah, well, that's funny because, you know, although we have just been talking about how important control was for Armani, he was also aware of the power of being adaptable. He actually told Bloomberg just last year that he wouldn't rule out an IPO or a sale to a larger group in the event that he died. But for now, though, it's definitely clear that it will be his heirs, a small select group who will decide the future of Armani. He didn't have any children, but he selected close family members and associates, including his nieces Silvana and Roberta Armani, to really drive the future of the brand. And we've already had a flavour of the direction that they might take in a statement from the firm announcing his death. And they've said that they will try to preserve that spirit of independence that was so important to Armani, but they have committed to moving with the times and operating with pragmatism. I'll definitely be interested to see who, if anyone, will take over that creative director role at Armani, perhaps one of the most famed roles in the fashion world.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.